When my husband, Michael, left for his 3-month overseas assignment, I thought the hardest part would be the quiet nights. We'd been married for 5 years, and though we had our ups and downs, we were steady, comfortable. Michael's father, Richard, had recently retired and offered to stay at the house occasionally to help with small repairs and make sure I wasn't lonely. I appreciated it at first, not realizing how much his presence would end up changing everything. Richard was a kind man, always polite, always the one who'd bring over tools and fix things before I could even ask. He was the kind of person everyone trusted, a former math teacher who'd helped raise Michael after his wife passed away when Michael was just a teenager. So when he offered to help repaint the living room while Michael was gone, I didn't think twice. The first few days were quiet. I worked from home, and Richard spent most of his mornings tinkering in the garage. But one evening, as a storm rolled in, the power went out. The wind howled through the trees outside, shaking the windows. Richard came into the living room carrying a flashlight, his expression calm but serious. "Don't worry, Emma," he said gently. "I've seen worse storms than this." We lit candles, and I remember thinking how eerie yet comforting the soft light was. He started telling me stories about Michael as a boy, how he used to climb trees and come home covered in mud. We laughed until the power came back on, and for the first time since Michael had left, the house didn't feel so empty. Over the following weeks, Richard stopped by more often. He'd fix a loose cabinet, replace a light bulb, or mow the lawn before I even noticed it needed doing. He never asked for thanks, but I'd always try to make him dinner as a small gesture. It became our quiet routine. He'd work on something around the house, I'd cook, and then we'd eat together while talking about anything and everything. It wasn't strange, it felt like family. But then, something unexpected happened. One morning, I came downstairs to find Richard sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his phone. His face looked pale, almost worried. "Everything okay?" I asked, setting my coffee mug down. He looked up, startled, and tried to smile. "Yeah, just some news from an old friend," he said quickly, then changed the subject. Over the next few days, I noticed him acting distant. He'd start working on a project and suddenly stop midway, lost in thought. Finally, I couldn't take the silence anymore. "Richard," I said one afternoon as he packed up his toolbox. "Something's wrong. You've been acting strange all week. What's going on?" He hesitated before sighing heavily. "Emma, I didn't want to tell you this without talking to Michael first, but someone's been spreading lies about him at his company." My heart skipped. "What do you mean lies?" He explained that an anonymous complaint had been filed against Michael, accusing him of something serious, financial misconduct. Richard said one of his old friends, who still had connections, had tipped him off. "They're investigating him quietly," Richard said. "And if they can't clear his name, he might lose his job." I felt my stomach twist. Michael had worked so hard for that position, often sacrificing time with me to get ahead. "Why didn't he tell me?" I whispered. "Because he doesn't know yet," Richard admitted. "I only found out yesterday." The next few weeks were tense. Richard was constantly on the phone, calling contacts, trying to find out who started the rumor. I barely slept, worrying what would happen if Michael came home to find his career in ruins. But the shocking part came one morning when Richard walked into the kitchen with a folder in his hand. "Emma," he said, voice low, "I found something." He opened the folder and pulled out a printed email. It was an internal message from someone in Michael's office, accusing him of stealing company funds, and the sender's name made my blood run cold. It was Janet, one of Michael's coworkers who had always been overly friendly with him at work events. Richard showed me other documents too, records that proved Janet had made several unusual transactions, using Michael's employee ID. It was a setup. "She's framing him," I breathed. Richard nodded grimly. "That's what it looks like." He told me he'd already contacted a lawyer friend who could help. I couldn't believe how far he'd gone to protect his son. He was risking his own reputation and privacy, digging into confidential information just to defend Michael. "Why would she do that?" I asked. "I think jealousy," Richard said. "Michael got promoted last year. Some people don't handle that well." For the next few days, we worked together to collect everything we could, emails, documents, even texts Janet had sent to Michael months ago that hinted at her resentment. It was strange how Richard and I became a team through all of it, united by fear but driven by loyalty. When Michael finally came home, I didn't know how to tell him. He walked through the door smiling, bags in hand, ready to hug me. I smiled back, trying to act normal, but the weight of everything we'd discovered was too heavy to hide. That night after dinner, Richard joined us in the living room. "Son," he began, "we need to talk about something serious." Michael frowned, confused, but as Richard laid everything out, the fake accusations, the evidence, we watched the color drain from his face. She really did this," he whispered. "I'm afraid so," Richard said softly. But we've got proof. You'll be fine. It took weeks of back and forth with lawyers and company officials, but eventually the truth came out. Janet had used her access to manipulate records, trying to cover her own mistakes. She was fired immediately, and Michael's name was cleared completely. He was even offered a promotion for handling the situation with integrity once it became public. When the storm was finally over, I turned to Richard one afternoon as we sat in the backyard. "You saved him," I said quietly. He smiled, a tired but warm smile. "That's what fathers do," he replied. "Even when their kids don't know they need saving." But that wasn't the only surprise waiting for me. A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail addressed to me and Michael. It was from the company, thanking Richard personally for his efforts and informing us that Michael's promotion came with a relocation opportunity, back to the city where Richard had taught for 30 years. "They want me back there," Michael said, reading the letter aloud. "And they're offering to pay for everything." Moving meant leaving behind the house Richard had helped fix and the memories we'd made there. But when I looked at him, I saw pride in his eyes, not sadness. "Go," he said. "Start fresh. That's what all this was for." On our last night before leaving, I walked into the living room, the same one Richard had painted months ago, and found him standing by the window, looking out at the yard. "Thank you," I whispered. "For everything. You didn't have to get involved like that." He shook his head. "Emma, when you married my son, you became part of this family. That means I'll always look out for you too." I felt tears sting my eyes, not from sadness, but gratitude. Richard wasn't just my father-in-law anymore. He'd become something far deeper, a true guardian of our family's peace. Months later, after we'd moved, Michael received another message from his company, an official commendation for both him and his father. It read, "For unwavering integrity and loyalty." We framed it in our new home, right by the front door. Sometimes, life surprises you in the most unexpected ways. When my husband left, I thought loneliness would be my biggest challenge. But instead, I discovered what true family means, a bond built not just on marriage or blood, but on love, trust, and the courage to stand up for each other when it matters most. And every time I look at that framed certificate, I remember that stormy night, the flicker of candlelight, and the man who quietly became the hero of our story.